These are conspiracy theories that I 100% believe are true. The pop culture conspiracy theory that I probably believe kind of the most, honestly, out of the plethora of theories that we've talked about is the fact that I do believe, allegedly, that Taylor Swift bought her way to fame. So this has been a long-running conspiracy theory for several years, and it's basically the idea that Scott Swift, Taylor Swift's dad, purchased hundreds of thousands of copies of Taylor Swift's first album in order to get it on the charts and get it seen by people. The reason I think that this is true is that Taylor Swift was an unknown 16-year-old artist in the country music space. Not to mention, there was not a lot of heavy radio press or press for her in general, and her first album sold 40,000 copies in the first week. No, I'm sorry, I don't believe it. There's kind of a long-running theory that like there's a warehouse somewhere with a bunch of Taylor Swift debut records that Scott Swift bought. I don't know if I think that that's true or if he just like invested a lot of money somehow, but I have always believed this theory because I just don't think the numbers add up for the situation that was at hand. Like, I think Taylor Swift would have been famous anyway, probably at some point, but I do think it definitely would have taken her longer. And people's #1 debut albums they're completely unknown, and not to mention a country artist, like that's unheard of essentially. There were also a lot of curves in the album sales, like they would sell a lot the first week and then have a significant dip the next, and it kind of went up and down like that, which usually resembles kind of like a label buy curve more than an organic debut. And you have to also think, we didn't really have social media. There was no TikTok sounds that was making this unknown artist become super viral. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I don't even know how people found Taylor Swift. And a lot of people think it's because her dad bought a bunch of the albums, and that's just the case. And I kind of think it's true. I really want to hear you guys' thoughts on this because I just don't think anything else makes sense. Unless her record label decided to buy these albums or put in a certain amount of money, and maybe Scott Swift also put in money. I just don't think it adds up. Personally. Sorry, I don't. I want to hear your guys' thoughts though, because this is personally something I've literally always believed to be true. Like, I honestly didn't think it was a conspiracy theory. I thought it happened. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts. All right, the next theory that I think is true is the cointelpro theory. And I do believe that this happened. It's essentially the FBI having a secret war on activists, which we're going to go further into and like talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and different theories about how people don't believe that his death was as what it seems. And it is just a dark theory. So imagine living in a country where your government secretly spies on you, not because you did anything wrong, but because you started to question the government. And before you're like, girl, I think that's what we live in now. I agree, but it was more talked about in the 50s. Between 1956 and 1971, the FBI ran a top secret operation called cointelpro, which stood for Counterintelligence Program. And again, allegedly, its mission was not to protect Americans like they fronted it, but it was to control them. So under the leadership of Hoover, the FBI began targeting anyone who was kind of disagreeing with their government. But at first it started with like communist groups that were protesting the government during the Cold War. And that's how it first started, but it quickly expanded not just to civil rights activists, but to feminist leaders, journalists, anti-war protesters like John Lennon, and even ordinary citizens who challenged authority. So the program began in 1956 after the Supreme Court ordered schools to desegregate in Brown versus Board of Education, and Hoover and his allies started to believe that civil rights movement wasn't an organic movement, but it was actually foreign inspired. I mean, he was just racist, okay? Sorry. So the FBI ended up authorizing these counterintelligence tactics to basically expose, disrupt, misdirect, or discredit these groups, which doesn't sound familiar. History repeats itself. I don't know, just saying. FBI took this on another freaking level. They bugged hotel rooms, tapped phones, forged letters, and even leaked fake stories to the newspapers. They also would send these fake anonymous notes that would, create this mistrust within the activist circles themselves, like, oh, your leader's sleeping with your wife, or your best friend's an informant, or whatever, just to get these people fighting against each other. COINTELPRO's main target at the time was definitely Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The FBI followed him for years and recorded his phone calls, bugged his hotel rooms, tracked his every single move. The FBI allegedly mailed him anonymous letters urging him to take his own life before he could receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Hello? That's actually freaking insane, and I don't know why they don't really teach this in history class. Just saying. This letter still exists today, and it's filled with threats about his private life, and it ends with, "There is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is." And temporarily this worked, okay? The FBI was planting these rumors and editing recording, which circulated to the press, and basically their aim was to discredit the civil rights movement from within. And it was working for the FBI at first. But then so many different movements came forward that it obviously ended up taking over what the FBI was doing. To me, what makes this theory really scary, and again, it's like not really theory because it actually happened. My theory is that it's still happening. That's kind of the conspiracy theory that I believe is true. And it's especially sinister because it wasn't just about surveilling people. It was psychological warfare that our government was placing upon its citizens. It happened. So like, why do we not believe that it could still be happening today? I don't know. FBI agents would purposely schedule arrests of people right before major protests to demoralize the organizers of these protests. They'd send fake breakup letters to partners of the activists. They would anonymously tip off different employers and landlords to get these civil rights activists evicted or fired, which is just bananas. Sometimes these FBI informants would actually provoke violence at rallies so the police would swoop in and arrest everyone. So yeah, again, is this happening now? I'd say that's a conspiracy theory that I definitely think is at least somewhat true. The fact that they were doing this for 20 years, like we know for a fact that's what was happening. Why is it so hard for people to believe that that could be still occurring to this day? It is. Sorry. Allegedly. I don't know. It's a conspiracy theory, okay? So what's interesting to me is this COINTEL program went completely like unknown by anybody until 1971, when a group calling themselves Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI broke into a Pennsylvania FBI office and stole thousands of classified documents that revealed all of this. They mailed these papers to the reporters, and one headline just changed everything, which was FBI secretly spying on Americans. And that was when this whole conspiracy turned into true facts. That was happening. So then in 1975, COINTELPRO was officially exposed and shut down. At least that's what we were told. So the FBI claims that this program ended in the 1970s, but many people argue that this basic idea is not over and that it's still happening to this day. And I have to say, I think I agree, allegedly. I just think it's interesting that a lot of protests against the government today, like things that are happening in this day and age, especially like against the current administration, a lot of people in these groups have reported infiltration tactics that they've noticed, their phones being tapped, being followed, etc., that sound eerily familiar to COINTELPRO. Just saying. I don't know. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this because I definitely think it's more true than it is conspiracy. I mean, obviously it's true that it did happen, but is it still happening to this day? I guess maybe we'll find out in 20 years, but let me know what you think. So when we talk about COINTELPRO and the government at that time, there is one name, of course, that comes up for good reason, and that is Martin Luther King Jr. And a lot of people think that his assassination was planned by the government, and I don't know. So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't just the FBI's biggest obsession. He was the symbol of everything that they feared at the time. Everything that Hoover's administration, they did not want unity or influence or the truth to be exposed. And Martin Luther King was making that happen. And by 1968, Martin Luther King was not only talking about civil rights, he was also talking about economic inequality and the Vietnam War. And he had become a global voice, calling out America's moral hypocrisy. And that terrified people in power. And then just like that, he was gone. So the official story is, of course, on April 4th of 1968, Dr. King was standing on a balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, when he was assassinated. The police obviously came, they found a rifle, some fingerprints, and a man named James Earl Ray, who had escaped prison a year earlier. So now, James Earl Ray was arrested at Heathrow Airport in London 2 months later, and he allegedly confessed to the murder, and then immediately recanted and said that he's being set up. But of course that didn't matter, and he signed a guilty plea to avoid the death penalty, and there was no trial, no witnesses, no cross-examination, and it was just a single day in court, and then the case was closed, which is kind of insane. So a lot of people believe that the government specifically set up James Earl Ray, and that he did not assassinate Dr. King, and it was instead motivated by the government. I mean, here's what we do know is that he was a small-time thief. Like, he spent most of his adult life in and out of prison for stealing shit and just being a menace overall. Yet with no training, no funding, and no known political motive, he managed to escape prison, travel across the country unnoticed, buy an expensive rifle, and stalk one of the most famous men in America, and then pull off the perfect one-shot kill. Like, come on. No. The story itself just sounds so cinematic and unreal that honestly it makes sense that there were a lot of people that didn't believe this to be true and thought that there was more of a conspiracy theory behind it. Now, what we do know here is that we have a man who is responsible for this, went to prison for this, and he claimed that he was being set up, that he didn't do anything, etc. And we also know that the FBI was after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We know that for a fact now with classified documents being revealed. So is it that crazy of a conspiracy theory to think that the government decided to end Dr. Martin Luther King's life? That's for you to decide. I don't know. Okay? I mean, come on. Like, I just feel like, what? And honestly, it doesn't stop there, okay? The FBI could target Martin Luther King Jr. and manipulate the truth around his death. So we have to think about it in the conspiracy theory sense of the idea that the FBI or the government targeted Martin Luther King Jr. and murdered him and then was able to manipulate the truth around his death. Could the government be capable of hiding such a thing? Again, that's for you to decide. But it kind of reminds me of Operation Mockingbird, which is essentially how the CIA might have been writing the news all along, which, are we surprised? All right, the next theory is somewhat on a lighter note, I guess, and it is the idea that the sugar industry paid scientists to blame fat instead of sugar. And I think this is 100% true, but again, a lot of this is still alleged. So if you remember in like the earlier 2000s, late 90s, everyone was blaming fat in regards to why people were fat and why people gained weight and what was unhealthy. People said that fat was the issue, trans fat specifically, saturated fat, etc. That was like the number one thing posted on all of the diet books, and in the wellness community, fat was just the enemy. But there has been, yet again, declassified information that the sugar industry paid scientists to act like fat was the problem when really it was sugar, which is bonkers. So by the early 1960s, America's doctors were kind of sounding the alarm about heart disease specifically. It had become a leading cause of death in the United States, and scientists were scrambling to figure out why this was and what was happening. And a researcher named Ansel Keys blamed fat and cholesterol, but the other theory that people had that was, led by a psychologist named John Yudkin blamed sugar for the heart disease increase in America. His data showed clear connections between rising sugar consumption and heart disease rates, but just as his theory started to gain traction, it mysteriously disappeared from mainstream science. He was mocked, discredited, and dismissed as an alarmist. And what he didn't know was that he was being set up against the entire industry's PR machine. So behind the scenes, there was this powerful lobbying group called the Sugar Research Foundation. It's now known as Sugar Association, and its mission was to promote the consumption of sugar as a vital part of a healthy diet. And when Dr. Yudkin began threatening the narrative, the foundation launched a campaign campaign to protect its profits. And like any other good conspiracy theory, they did it by controlling the science behind it. So there was a memo written in 1964 that said our particular interest in countering the negative attitudes towards sugar by shifting the focus onto fat and cholesterol. And again, that memo from the company is crazy because obviously what happened next, but this memo wasn't even discovered until 50 years later. So that's when we knew that the conspiracy theory was actually true. So in 1965, the Sugar Research Foundation paid 3 Harvard scientists, the equivalent of about $50,000 today, to publish a review article on the causes of heart disease, linking it directly to fat and blaming fat and excusing sugar, basically. So what's crazy is one of these scientists was Dr. Frederick Stare, who was the head of Harvard's nutrition department, and he was still able to be bought off. And basically him and the other scientists were instructed to downplay any links between sugar and heart disease and instead blame dietary fats. When the study was published, there was no mention of the sugar industry's involvement here. Like, nobody knew that the sugar industry had paid to have basically the heat taken off of them and put onto cholesterol and fat. So to the public, it looked like a very neutral, peer-reviewed scientific research. And a lot of people, of course, ended up believing it. And that's how quickly a lie spread over 5 decades. This was the #1 topic about how fat was so bad for you. And like, people wouldn't say sugar's like super great, but like sometimes they would. But this Harvard paper definitely had exactly the effects that the sugar industry had hoped for. Government agencies, doctors, schools, all of these things began pushing low-fat options for literally everything. The food industry followed suit, replacing fat with sugar to make products taste good again. So they would have these low-fat products, but they would be loaded with sugar. And everyone thought because it was low-fat, they were eating healthy. Like fat-free yogurts, salad dressings, cereals, all of that shit was just loaded with sweeteners. And again, people thought that they were eating healthy, but they were actually consuming more sugar than ever before. Between 1970 and 1999, per capita sugar consumption skyrocketed, and so did the rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, you name it. And it's just insane that we weren't getting sicker because of fat or trans fat. We were literally getting sicker based on a lie. And that's kind of nuts. And honestly, this entire cover-up might have stayed hidden forever, and I think people would still be pushing a low-fat narrative as hard as they were, if not for Dr. Kristen Kearns, a dentist and researcher at UCSF. So in 2007, she was attending a dental conference, and she noticed how strangely defensive industry representatives were about sugar. Obviously, when it comes to the dentist, sugar is obviously not recommended, cavities, etc. That was kind of the only place that you heard sugar was bad. But this led Dr. Kristen to do some digging of her own through old archives, trade magazines, government reports, and she finally stumbled upon a collection of internal sugar industry documents at a library in Colorado. And this was where she found letters, memos, and contracts showing how the Sugar Research Foundation directly funded and influenced research outcomes. And her findings were published in 2016, which again, 50 years later, people are now knowing the sugar industry quietly paid scientists and doctors to point blame at fat, which is kind of insane that this happened. If you think about it, it just shows the power of PR and the power that like doctors and scientists really do have. Like, they can low-key start rumors about anything and people will believe it. I mean, we'd see that all the time on social media, not even from doctors, but well, actually, yeah, there are TikTok doctors that definitely just say things that probably aren't true. Just saying. It's kind of actually insane to me that this was such a big conspiracy theory that took 50 years to uncover. We're gonna learn in 50 years was absolutely terrible for us that we were doing, that we were told was healthier. The conspiracy theories are honestly endless. And I do feel like it low-key also supports the whole big pharma theory and the thought that the, big pharma wants us to be sick and that's why we don't have a cure for cancer or a cure for, many other diseases. And I kind of agree to an extent. And I also think the sugar industry maybe could have been working with big pharma because big pharma wants people to be obese. They want people to be sick and want people to need their drugs. I don't know. It's kind of all part of a conspiracy theory, but let me know your thoughts. So something similar that definitely got me thinking is the idea of fluoride in water and the whole mind control myth and the science and the history behind it. The pink drink that you guys drank at the GATE program or gifted program as a kid, a lot of you guys said that was fluoride, which I think is so strange to be feeding a child fluoride at school? Like, what the fuck? But anyway, if you grew up in the United States, you've definitely heard it since elementary school that fluoride is amazing for your teeth and you need to use fluoride rinses and etc., etc. But this fluoride has actually been accused of something much darker, which is controlling human behavior. The debate over fluoride is one of the longest running, might be true, conspiracy theories in American history. A lot of people do believe that fluoride has some mind control properties, and that's why they were shoving it down our throats and saying that we needed it for our teeth, etc. And I don't know. Honestly, I do think it kind of makes sense. A little bit, okay? So in 1945, Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first city to add fluoride to its public water supply. Health officials called it a public health miracle, and within a decade, the rates of tooth decay plummeted. So by the 1960s, 2/3 of Americans were drinking fluoride water, but not everyone was as down to just think it was great, okay? There were conspiracy theories. A lot of the people who argued against having fluoride in everyone's water without consent sounded less like trying to help everyone have healthy teeth and more like a mass medication system. And honestly, I can kind of understand where people are coming from with that because don't the dentists want you to have cavities? At the end of the day, I feel like the dentists are getting the stick here. I don't know. By the 1950s, there were tons of anti-fluoride groups of people. There were a mix of scientists and conspiracy theorists. They were all claiming that this was part of a way to dumb down America, and that fear even made it into pop culture and people were talking about it everywhere. So the reason this conspiracy theory has some merit to it is because fluoride was being added to the water at the same time that the US was actually running governmental experiments and behavioral experiments on citizens. MK Ultra, and the CIA's mind control was using LSD and hypnosis and to other things to try and control people. And a lot of people think that because of this, the government was trying to find a mass way to control people, so what better than to put it in the water supply? Also, documents from the 1950s show that both the US and Soviet governments studied fluoride's neurological effects in animals. Some military scientists even noted that high fluoride exposure would reduce aggression in test subjects, which a detail later fueled the entire conspiracy theory that this fluoride water is trying to make us more docile overall. So that led a lot of people to wonder, was fluoride chosen to be put in our waters as for dental health or for something darker like social engineering and trying to get the population to be massively controlled? I don't know what I think about this, okay? I have a lot of different thoughts on this because for one, I do know fluoride in small amounts definitely does protect against dental decay. We have the research on that, but to chronically have high exposure to fluoride, that's kind of a question. In 2019, a large Canadian study found a small correlation between high maternal fluoride and lower IQ scores in infants. This doesn't necessarily prove the whole mind control chemical, that fluoride is a mind control thing, and that's why the government puts it in our water. There's nothing to really prove that to be true, but it is definitely an interesting theory. And I will say, a lot of you guys commented on my previous video talking about the GATE program and how you guys learned freaking Russian and Morse code and all this shit. And a lot of you guys remember them being given a pink liquid in a little medicine cup at school in the 90s and 2000s. And a lot of you guys claimed in my comments that that was actually fluoride that they were giving you. And I do think that that's fucking weird. It's weird to be given fluoride outside of the dentist. I'm sorry. I mean, I think it's even weird at the dentist. I always would opt against it because honestly it just tasted gross. I didn't like that. But either way, I think this conspiracy theory is certainly interesting and I do think that there could be truth to it. And with everything we've talked about in this video about the government and seeing what they're actually capable of, is it that far off? I don't know. You let me know what you think. All right, the last theory I want to talk about is something that's been interesting me for a very long time, and it is the idea of why all of these celebrities have Lyme disease. I've been thinking about this for so long because I think it is so strange how many celebrities, big celebrities, have been diagnosed with Lyme disease. Where are you guys getting it and what the fuck? Like what? I don't know. I don't even know what the conspiracy is here. I just think it's something that we need to talk about, okay? I mean, Avril Lavigne, Justin Bieber, Yolanda and Bella Hadid, Shania Twain, Ben Stiller, Kelly Osbourne, Alec Baldwin, like the list goes on and on of different celebrities who just happen to have Lyme disease. I don't know why so many of them do, because I have never personally met a person with Lyme disease in my life. And like, what are the odds that all of these celebrities just have it? Like, does no one else think that that's weird? I really want to hear your guys' thoughts on this though, because I want to know if it's something that you've noticed as well. I don't know what the conspiracy theory I have is. I don't know. And I would love for you guys to come up with something, because why do they all have Lyme disease? Is it just a coincidence? I don't really believe in coincidences. Is it to like make celebrities seem more like relatable in some way? Like, do they think that that's like we're all just like worried about things like they just wanted them to have like various diseases or mental health issues or etc. that make them more relatable? I don't know, because do you know anyone who has Lyme disease? I mean, I know it's like kind of like not that uncommon, like I'm aware, but I personally, again, I don't know anyone who has it. And I just think it's strange that there are a plethora of celebrities who just keep getting diagnosed with it. I feel like I see it at least once a year that a new huge celebrity has been diagnosed with Lyme disease. And I want to know why. I want to know why. Sorry. Anyway, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of these conspiracy theories, and do you think that they are true? What do you think is true? What do you think is false? Let us know. But anyway, that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.